Hey everyone, today let's continue and set up our backend. So in the beginning I want to create a new folder called VS Code, and I want to create the same file as we did for the front end, settings.json. I'm just going to copy everything from there, but I'm going to change API in here. So this is going to be our API project. Let's close this. So for my development environment, I'm using Laravel Valet. So it actually, what it does, it scans the folder where you have all your projects, and it will create a simple URL for you to access your projects from. And on top of this, I have a software called PHP Monitor. You can see everything about it in here. And basically what this does is it's like a GUI for your Valet. And if I search for my current project right now, FairMobileGames, you can see that it detected this folder. But the way we made our folder is that we've created this FairMobileGames folder, and inside we have an API and a client folder. But because of this is now not working. So if I go to FairMobileGames.test, you can see it cannot find it because it's trying to find this public folder in order to show you everything. So if we want to fix that, we need to create a new link. So this is my API folder, the exact one as in here. I'm going to open it, and then we're going to say fmg. So it's going to create this fmg.test. So let's create this link. You can see it in here now. So let's try and open it. fmg.test. So this is now the project from here. So this is a really handy tool for developing websites. Later down the project, you will actually see that we are not able to use this because we want to use Google Sign-In, and Google Sign-In only works with localhost on a development environment. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to delete this from here. I'm going to unlink it. Let's close it for now. So now if I try to open it, it doesn't work. But what we will be doing is that we're going to use PHP artisan serve. So when you do that, you can actually access your project in localhost. Basically, we have to say localhost 8000. So now it works. You can see that the requests made it through. Okay, next what we want to do is we want to create our OAuth credentials. So in order to do that, we need to go to the Cloud Console, Google Cloud Console. If you don't have an account, you should create one. And then in here you go to API services and credentials. Basically is this page. And you click on create credentials, OAuth client ID. The first time you open this, it will ask you to complete a consent page, print consent form. You fill that in. And then you go in here and say you want a web application, you give it a name, and you also give it authorized redirect URIs. I already have one, so I'm going to show you mine. FMG web, this is the name, and then we have authorized redirect URIs, which for me is going to be localhost 8000. That's where the server is running, and this is going to be our URL, API of callback. And then I've also added this one, which is going to be the callback for the live view for the live project. It's not ready yet, but I just added it so I don't have to add it later. And you have in here client ID, and then you have the client secrets. So you just need to copy those. I already have them copied, and I will just add them in my project. So we are going to add it into our .env file. I'm going to add them at the end, and because I already have them, I'm just gonna copy them from here. Okay, so we have the client, we have the secret, and then we have the redirect. Okay, next what we want to do is we want to install Laravel Socialite. So Socialite is a package that lets you log in into the website using different social platforms like Facebook, Google, GitHub, and all that. So in order to install that, we just need to run composer install, composer require. Let's install that. And when it's gonna finish, we should go to the services file over here, and you can see we already have some services, but the one we want is actually Google. And for that, we're going to pass in this code. We're gonna have client ID, client secret, and the redirect URL. And these three things are coming in from the env file. Next, let's create a controller for our Socialite API endpoints. So in order to do that, I'm gonna say art make controller Socialite controller. By the way, if you want to use it like this, you can create an alias in your bash or ZSH, depending on what you're using. So you go nano ZSHRC, and you can see in here I have multiple aliases, and one of them is art, which just evaluates to PHP Artisan. Okay, so if we go back to our code, let's go take a look at our controller. We can say Socialite controller. And for the Socialite controller, we're gonna need to have two methods or functions. Public function, we're going to need a redirect one, and then we're going to need public function callback. So the way OAuth works is that we're going to send the user to a Google-owned domain where they're going, which is going to come from here, right? So we're gonna call redirect, and this is going to return another redirect to Google's own domain where you do all your login and everything else. And then when the login is successful, Google is going to throw you back to a callback URL, one of the ones that we set up in Google Cloud Console. But in our case, it's going to send us to this URL, right? And from this URL, we can already authenticate and authorize the user and do whatever else we need to do next. Okay, in order for these two to work, we actually need to create some routes. And we are only going to be using API routes, which means that, for example, right now, if we go to localhost 8000, the routes in this file are going to be accessed through localhost 8000 with API, right? So if we say here /user, you're actually going to be accessing it through API user. Cool. So let's see, we don't really need this right now. We want to create a group of routes. So we're gonna say prefix here. We're gonna call them off. We want it to be a group and call back in here. Let's fix that, and then we're gonna want a get, which is going to be redirect, and this route is going to call our Socialite controller class, and it's going to be the redirect function. Redirect. Okay. And the next one is going to be the same, but in this case it's going to be a callback, and it's going to call the callback function. Let's clean up everything a little bit. So we don't need the env anymore. Let's clear this. Let's go in here. Cool. A good practice to keep all your routes and API calls in order is to use something like Postman. This is what we're gonna do right now, and so the software is called Postman. So when you first download it and you start it, you have on the left side here you have collections, you have environments. So for the environments, we're going to create an environment and let's call it, we're gonna call FMG local. And for this environment, we want to have an API URL, which in our case is going to be HTTP localhost 8000. Cool, let's save that, and then we go to collections. We can create a new collection, a blank collection, and this one is going to be FMG. Cool, and inside the collection we can create all kinds of requests now. So in our case, this is going to be a redirect, and then we also want to have another request called callback. These two are basically just going to be used in the beginning because we just want to make sure that they work and for debugging purposes, but later it wouldn't make too much sense to use them when we'll have the whole Socialite login working. So let's do the redirect in order to access the environment variables. I think it was like this 2 times, and then you say API URL. But first of all, you need to select the environment from here. This is the environment that's going to be used for these requests. So let's try again, API URL. You can already see it in here. So I'm going to say API URL. Basically, this is going to be replaced with this address in here. So we're going to say, oh, actually, let's call this localhost API, and the same in here. Okay, let's save this, and then we're gonna say off redirect. Okay, and we're gonna do the same for the callback, so we're gonna say off callback. Okay, now if we go back to our code in here, let's go to Socialite controller. So when we're gonna call it, it's gonna call the Socialite controller. Let's actually import the class too. Cool, we have it in here. Let's do some cleanup a little bit. Okay, so when we call the API of redirect, is going to go to the Socialite controller. And in here, let's just return something. Let's say return this is redirect, and in here we're gonna say this is callback. Okay, let's go back in here and let's actually call them send. Okay, we don't have our server running, so let's go back in here, say art serve. This is redirect, and in here this is callback. Okay, so now we know that these two endpoints work. Next, let's actually try and write these functions in here. So for the redirect, as we said, we just want to return another redirect. So we're gonna say Socialite driver. In here, we're gonna use the Google driver, the one we set in the services file. We're gonna say here stateless. Because we don't want to use any sessions, or we don't want the browser to look for any sessions, and we're going to create the redirect. Okay, let's import the class in here. Okay, so this is just going to redirect us to the Google domain, and for the callback we are gonna say Google user. So this is what we're gonna get back, right? We're gonna go to the Google domain, do our login, and then come back in here. And with all this, Socialite is gonna help us. So Socialite, we're gonna say driver again, we're gonna say Google in here. And then we can say stateless, because again, we don't want to use any sessions. And then we say user. So basically, this method here is going to actually take all the get parameters that are going to be sent by Google back to us, and is going to do everything necessary to actually get the user from Google. So what we're gonna get is going to be a token, email, and all the other stuff. Okay, so what do we want to do with that user now? We want to actually use the user model, the one we have from Laravel, and we want to update or create, because there's not really such a thing as register or login, because usually you either log in or register and create an account. But with this social login, we actually get the user back. So what we want to do is we want to either create the user if it doesn't exist, or update it if it already exists. Just update it with the latest information we got from Google. Cool. So in this case, what we want to do, I'm going to explain this a little bit later, the first array. So the second array is going to be everything we want to get from Google and save into our database. So we're going to save the name. I'm going to say this one is going to be the email. Then we want to save the avatar. Then we also want to save the token. It's going to be called Google token in our database, but the one that comes from there is going to be called just token. And in here we want to say Google refresh token. And the way it's called in the Google user is going to be refresh token. Cool. So the first parameter in here actually tells us what is the unique ID that we have to check against. So we need to tell it if this ID already exists, then update, but if it doesn't, then create it. So the ID in here is going to be used as Google ID, and this one is going to be populated with the Google ID, basically Google user ID. Okay, let's just close this in here. Let's import the class, and we want the app models user. Cool. And then at the end in here, what we'll want to do, or what the solution I came up with, there might be a better way to do it. So what we want to do in here is we want to redirect, and we'll want to redirect to our front end. So I'm gonna tell you how this works now. Config, we're gonna make a file, a config file, which is gonna be called FMG, and inside of it we're gonna have a front-end URL. To that front-end URL we're going to append a get parameter, which is going to be called code, and to that code we're going to append the Google token. Okay, so for now I want to close this for a little bit, and then let's handle this part. So we want to have a front-end URL as an environment variable. In order to do that, we add it in here. We're gonna say front-end URL, and we want that to be HTTP localhost 3000. Okay, and the right way to actually use all your environment variables inside your project is either add them in one of these files over here, or I like to create my own. So I'm gonna say fmg.php, and you just need to return an array from this file. So what we're gonna say here, we're gonna say return, and we're going to return an array, and we called it front-end URL. And to access the environment variables, you say env and then give it the name of the variable. I'm gonna say URL. Okay, I think that should work fine. Now let's go back to our Socialite controller. So just for the sake of it, let's say I want to return this, just so we make sure that it actually works. Let's try this again in our postman. So we want to call the callback. Cool. So we can see that this is the environment variable we were using in there. Let's go back in here. Let's just delete this. Cool. And just for the sake of it, if you want to see how the what it actually returns from this redirect, you can actually say, let's see if we return this, if it actually works. So let's go to redirect, send this. We're gonna preview it, you don't really see much, but we can actually see the URL that is returning. So let's try that. Okay, so we actually need to say here, get target URL. And let's see what it's going to return. Cool. So this is what Google actually sends back, right? You can see that we have all our client ID in here, and we also have the redirect URL, all the scopes, and the response type. Cool. Let's close this. Now let's clean up a little bit around here. So just want to close this for now. I want to close the env, this one. Okay, the next thing that we're missing is that we are actually missing our database. So in order to do that, I'm using this table plus, this one, to organize all my databases. So the way you do it is that you go in here and you create our new connection. Because we're going to use our local MySQL, in here we just need to give it like some kind of name, and you leave everything else as default. So now even if I test it like this, you can see everything works. If something doesn't work, it will be highlighted in red. But I've already created one. So let's go in here, and we're going to actually create a database. And this one is going to be called FMG. And let's select it. So we can see that there's nothing in here yet. So in order to populate it with some tables, we need to run our Laravel migrations. So before we actually run it, I want to change something because we've added these new fields to our user table. So let's go into database, find the default migrations, and we need to find the one with the users table. Okay, so we know we have the ID, name, email verify. We can leave that. For now, I don't think we're gonna need the password because the only way to actually log in or register is using social logins. So that's why we're gonna make it nullable. I don't want to just delete it. Okay, what's going to be next? So we're gonna have multiple new columns. So it's gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4. So we want to say this one is going to be Google ID. This is not going to be nullable. Then we're going to have avatar. I'm not sure, that might be nullable when it comes back from Google. Then we're going to have Google token, which could probably be nullable. And then we need the Google refresh token. That one I'm sure that can be nullable. So actually remember I made an error in here, so I want to call this refresh token like this. Cool. So we have the migration. Now if we say art migrate, oh wait, we forgot to change something in the env file. So in the env file, we're gonna need to change the name from API to, what do we call it, FMG. let's see now if it works. So art, migrate. Go, it created all the tables. Let's see them now. So we can see we have the users table and it has the Google token. Cool. So that seems to have worked. Let's go and open this. Let's close this and close this. I think it's time now to actually try everything we've written until now. So one thing I want to do, I want to dump over here. And I want to see the Google user. Details are coming into the callback. So let's open our client. Actually, let's also start our server. So let's say art serve in here. And then let's look at our client. Let's start it and see how this works. npm run dev. Cool. So we have our main page over here. What I want to do is I want to create this user page. Not user, we want to create an off page. So we're gonna say folder off. And then inside here I'm gonna say index.view. We're gonna write a template. We're gonna have let's add a div in here. We're gonna say template. This is the off page. And then another div inside. No, actually this is going to be an anchor tag for now. And we are going to send the user, as soon as they click on the link, we're going to send them to our redirect. So we're going to say localhost 8000 API off redirect. And we're going to call this continue with Google. Let's fix all problems. Then we also want to add, let's say when we click on this icon over here, we're actually going to go to continue with Google. So in order to do that, we have to go to our top nav. And we want to say, so this icon goes to user. We actually want to go to off. Let's see if I click in here. Cool. So now what should happen is this is going to go to the redirect page and it should send me to the Google authentication page. Okay, so it says here sign in to continue to FairMobileGames. Okay, so this is all the data we're getting back from Google. We can see we have the unique ID, we have name, email, avatar, URL, and then we have the token. So this is the token we're going to use to actually authenticate and authorize and everything else. Okay, now let's go back to our main page, localhost 3000. Let's just have this open for now. And let's go back to our API. We want to actually save or log in our user. Then we want to redirect to our page. So we're gonna go to the main page with a code. Let's save this. Let's open our client. Cool. So what we want to do is that always when we open the website, we want to see if we have a token available. if we have a token available, then we want to grab our user information from our own database. Okay, so a couple of things we need to do. Let's first start a script. This is going to be a setup script with TypeScript. And what I usually do is that I want to have a variable which is going to be called loading. We're going to make it true by default. And what I usually do is I have one screen to show while it's loading, and then a different screen to actually load everything we need. So we're going to say here vf loading. Then we're just going to say loading in here and else. Okay, so if it's still loading, then we're going to show this text over here, and if it's not, we're going to continue with everything else. Cool. Let's see. So let's just reload this, see how it works. So because it never actually changes, it's always going to be showing this text over here. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to say onMounted. We want to run this bit. So if it's if everything is already mounted, we want to first of all look into our parameters in our URL. So in order to do that, we can say something like if route, oops. So we're gonna say if route query and code. This is the one that's coming in from the callback. We're gonna do something in here, and actually, if we want to be able to do that, we need to say const root equals use root. Cool. Don't actually need this in here. Okay, have a typo in here, use root. Then what we're gonna do is that we're going to save our authorization token into a cookie. So let's see if we have that cookie. It's gonna call FMG token. We're gonna say use cookie FMG token. Cool. So if we have a code in the get parameters, we want to say we want to save this into a cookie FMG token value equals route query code a string. Okay, let's see if we can fix these issues. If we're gonna say reload, and that was a little bit annoying, so in here it has to say use cookie. Okay, cool. Save that and restart our server. Okay, cool. So we're gonna receive the cookie. We're gonna receive the token, and if that token exists, we're gonna save it into the cookie over there. Okay. And for now, let's just say loading value equals false at the end. Cool. Let's restart this. Let's log in again and see what's going to happen. Google ID doesn't have a default. Let's go to our API. And I think it's because we made some error in our migration. Yeah, so it doesn't like that. So let's make this one nullable too. And if you actually want to repopulate your table, you can just say, not to table, your database, so you can say art migrate, I think it was fresh. Yeah, so fresh is going to actually dump all the tables and reinsert them back. So let's say art serve again. If we're going to localhost 3000, click on here, continue with Google. Cool. So we did get the code back from our callback, and let's now actually see if we have the user in the database. Refresh this. Cool. So we have the name, email, but we don't have the new ones, right? So we don't have the Google ID, Google token, Google refresh token. And that's actually because Laravel does not allow you to mass assign some variables. So in order to fix that, first of all, we need to go to our user model. We're gonna go in here, and I usually like deleting all these fillable ones. And then also go to the app service. We need to go to app service provider, and in the boot method, I want to say model on guard. Basically allows me to do everything with a model, because for now at least I know what I'm doing. So let's delete this from here. And let's try it again. So let's go in here. Just delete this code for now. Let's go back in here, continue with Google. Cool. Let's refresh. So now you can see we have all these values in here populated. Let's go back to our code. Okay, I think we're gonna leave it here for now. Let's just close some of the stuff we don't actually need. Cool. Let's go. And I'll see you in the next one.